Be right back.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Are we ready?
We're ready. I'm going to start the webinar now.
Let's give a moment for everybody to join us, and then we'll start. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our participants and our observers. We really appreciate you joining us for our final dialogue in this series, Ocean Observing of the Future. My name is Stanka Willis. I am a former president of the Marine Technology Society. And along with MTS, these dialogues are being sponsored by the Global Ocean Observing System, industry partners Kongsberg Discovery, and L3 Harris, and supported by a grant from the National Oceanic and Atmospherics Administration and the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System. Today, we're focused on market maturity. So let's begin with an overview of the ocean enterprise. To understand it, we should first consider the ocean or blue economy. According to the OECD, the ocean economy encompasses both established maritime sectors such as fishing, shipping, and oil and gas, along with emerging industries including offshore renewable energy, aquaculture, marine mineral extraction, tourism, maritime monitoring and surveillance, and marine biotechnology. According to the OECD's April 2025 report, Ocean Economy to 2050, the ocean economy would rank as the world's fifth largest economy if it was considered a country. Between 1985 and 2020, it contributed approximately 3 to 4% of global gross value added, or GVA, and supported employment for up to 133 million full-time equivalents. As well, the global economy increased from 1.3 trillion US dollars to 2.6 trillion, with an average annual growth rate of 2.8%. If current trends persist, estimates suggest the global ocean economy could be nearly 4 times its 1995 level in 2050. The ocean enterprise represents an integral segment of the broader ocean economy, focused on ocean observation, forecasting, and related services across the public, private, and academic sectors. Stakeholders within the ocean enterprise deliver observations, infrastructure, measurements, forecasting, and operational services that inform decision-making in the marine context. All of you are part of the ocean enterprise. The Ocean Enterprise Initiative developed from the successful Dialogues with Industry series held in 2022 and 2023, and subsequent development of the Dialogues with Industry roadmap. Our mission is to grow the ocean observing system through better public-private partnerships and by creating a globally inclusive forum to understand market opportunities, incentivize ocean solutions innovation, facilitate data and information exchange, develop a workforce, and proliferate scalable technology to achieve benefits for stakeholders across the entirety of the ocean enterprise. The roadmap lays out 3 priority areas that you see on the slide, along with some of the types of activities under our initiatives, such as these dialogues. The ocean information value chain is a framework that describes how ocean observations are converted through a wide range of interactions, transformations, and service delivery mechanisms into products that have value to society, decision makers, and business leaders. The value chain approach highlights the significance of ocean information and services, with this graphic showing how the ocean enterprise and its activities connect across the information value chain. The blue discs at the bottom represent the present extent of private sector participation, providing an estimate of the current relative market size. The arrows indicate projected growth potential for private industry in each segment. All market segments have opportunities to benefit from innovation, and these advancements can be leveraged commercially. But what defines a mature ocean enterprise? On this slide is a proposed statement of what a mature ocean enterprise could look like. We offer this as background and for you to consider as these discussions unfold. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this definition in both the discussions and in the chat. As the planning team for the dialogues convened, it was noted that definitions for accessible and low-cost ocean technologies were not available. Following discussions, the team suggests definitions shown on the slides. Both are characterized by a combination of sensor, instrument, and platform affordability in terms of cost, operations, and maintenance. With accessible, we provided a definition in terms of a reduction of magnitude in the cost. For low cost, we propose the definition in both the terms of a threshold price and a magnitude of cost reduction. For the price threshold, we note that there could be differences related to observed parameters, but that generally less than $1,000 is the threshold. We will not specifically discuss these definitions, nor have they been endorsed by the ocean observing community, but are again offered as context for the discussion. We are happy for you to provide comments in the chat, and which will then be used in the dialogue reports and in the background paper. We also developed a new graphic to augment the ocean information value chain. Using the radar chart, we map the currently prevailing trends together with an estimated level of technology readiness, time to prevalence, and their potential impacts on the ocean enterprise. The center of the diagram illustrates areas with lower technology readiness and a longer projected timeline before market impact is expected. The greater the radial distance, the more advanced the trend and the shorter anticipated time to full impact. The size of each point reflects the potential magnitude of a given trend. Certain trends are present along multiple market segments. The highest concentration of trends is observed within the initial market segment, observing technologies, with frequency declining across the value chain. This distribution may reflect an inherent bias due to the author's focus on observing technologies, or it may accurately indicate current patterns of innovation within the sector. The numbers on the radar charts correspond to these items, where those in orange we judge to be specifically enabling accessible ocean technologies. Once again, we're putting this diagram out as context and welcome the enterprise to comment on it through the chat and directly to the Ocean Enterprise team. These dialogues aim to improve understanding of market aggregation and demand opportunities for scaling technologies that support innovation and bring them to market more quickly. What makes this effort different is rather than relying on a single panel at a session at various ocean-related venue conferences, which are all valuable, our planning team has dedicated considerable effort in developing 3 interrelated dialogues on each of the topics. We invite your input regarding actionable recommendations, and our moderator is going to guide your discussion towards practical outcomes. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion. Hans is a member of our MTS team and serves as the Senior Director of the Ocean Enterprise Initiative. Prior to joining the Ocean Enterprise Initiative, Hans was the director of the Great Lakes Water Studies Institute at Northwestern Michigan College, and before that, spent 2 decades at the University of Michigan as a researcher, engineer, and administrator spanning hydrodynamics, ocean engineering, and marine technology. Once again, thank you for everyone's participation, and Hans, in advance for you moderating. We look forward to a robust conversation. Hans, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Nenka, and thanks for the warm introduction. It's my pleasure to join all of you for this third and final dialogue session in our series on ocean observing of the future. And I'll just go through a little bit of boilerplate, some of the rules of the road as we go through this. But for all of you invited participants, we ask that you keep your video on during the discussion, and we invite you to use the raise hand feature so I can call on you to share your thoughts with the group. In some cases, I may direct a question at a particular participant or a group of participants. And in the interest of keeping the discussion moving, I may shift to a new question before I've been able to call on everyone who has raised their hand. I apologize in advance if I do miss anyone or I cut anyone short. In the interest of time, also, I will not be introducing you as invited participants, but instead, please tell everyone your name, role, and your organization when you speak for the first time. For our audience participants, please listen to the conversation and type your questions or thoughts in the Q&A for everyone to see. You can also layer in feedback to the questions or comments posted by everyone else. And for everyone, please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. So our conversation today is divided up into 4 sessions. We've set aside about 30 to 35 minutes for questions and discussions in each of the first 3 sessions, with a short break in between. Depending on how that conversation is going, I may shorten or extend a session, and our final session will be an open discussion among both our participants and observers. And please note that this dialogue, the Q&A, and the chat are all being recorded and will be made publicly available in the coming weeks. The content of the session report, however, will not include attribution to the comments or questions of any participant. So let's get started to what I think is going to be a great discussion today, very interactive, and let's have some fun while doing so. And so to kick it off, I'm going to start with our first section, which examines the emergence of mass markets for ocean technologies. And while in situ ocean observing technologies and the use of collecting ocean data have and continued to expand rapidly, it remains unclear if, how, and when true mass markets will form. In this first section, our conversation will gather participants' perspective on the supply and demand dynamics shaping these markets, especially for emerging accessible and low-cost sensors and platforms as they compare to traditional technologies. A key issue is whether mass production follows from innovation in the supply side or from demonstrated needs in the demand side. And I mean that from production can scale as the market demands it, but new technology, is it enabling it, or is it because new standards or capability like AI have created a demand that hasn't existed before? So I'll kick this off to the first question for everyone. And again, please raise your hand. And that is, where do current constraints on market growth mainly lie? Is this technology development, production capacity, or consumer adoption? I will start with Cooper.
Good morning from Portland, Maine. So Cooper Van Branken, founder of Ocean Data Network, private sector startup, and then also co-chair of FVON, the Fishing Vessel Ocean Observing Network, which is an emerging network within the global ocean observing system. from my perspective, this is a very clear and easy question to answer because it is very much coming from the demand side in terms of what I see as the key constraints. We're doing a lot of pushing, and from my perspective, there needs to be a lot more pulling. Granted, there can be a lot of nuance there with more tricky essential ocean variables on biogeochemical parameters and things like that. But for the most part, we need a lot more demand. Thank you.
Thanks, Cooper. Go with Jeff and then Emma.
Yeah, so I'm Jeff Atkins. I'm an economist working now with TBD Economics. I have been working as an economist for the federal government, looking at federal government investments in infrastructure since my undergrad internship in the early 1980s. I also agree I'm not as familiar with this specific field as other people. Reading through the background materials, it seems like a huge problem is going to be the fragmented demand. It seems to me that this very strong basic core of observations is being provided by federal investments, and to expand upon that, especially tapping into private sector investments, it's going to be mainly aligned with filling gaps, either in spatial or temporal resolution, spatial temporal density of observations, geographic gaps. And it seems to me that this is going to be an economic problem with an engineering solution. That you're going to have to find ways to I saw a term in the background information, the aggregation of demand. I think that's critical to find ways of clustering different components of this fragmented demand that can be met either through some sort of Swiss Army knife type sensor arrangement or modular designs or whatever. This be determined by the engineers, but this somehow converting this very disaggregated demand into something more aggregated that can generate economies of scale on the production side and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Jeff. Emma.
Thanks. So I'm going to agree with the first two speakers. My name is, I'm Emma from IOC UNESCO, and I support the Global Ocean Observing System, GOOS. I don't think we have enough drive from that demand side, from the consumer of information. I don't think we're yet good enough at tracking how our information, where our information is getting to in all of the locations, and doing some level of gap analysis. I mean, if you're looking from the intergovernmental perspective, this might be with member states, of saying where the biggest demand, where the biggest drivers are, and how we're fulfilling that. And so I think this is a clear area where maybe we could also do something with the future dialogues, also kind of looking at this in some way. But the other thing is that in some areas there might be a really high need, but in the end the ocean observing market might be still a little too small. And can we be smarter about teaming up with other sectors that are bigger, defense, or I don't know, some of the other industries that the same providers are providing into, and be a bit smarter about finding some cross leverage where our asks are similar. I think manufacturers are looking at doing that anyway, but maybe we could also have a think about that.
Thanks, Emma. Millie, then Francisco.
Millie Pitts with Ocean Exchange. I'm in an airport, so I'm going to apologize in advance for the background noise. I agree with everyone. I'm going to put a slight nuance to it and use the word need. And I think that has come up. If need is equal to demand, or is a synonym with demand, I think there are plenty of needs. It's often who's going to pay for it, which gets in the way. And that's not one of the three choices you gave us, Hans. And I don't think it's a production capacity constraint, because if someone were going to pay for it, we would find the production capacity. The marketplace would solve that problem. I represent mostly the private sector in what we do, and we see nascent supplies, but they die on the vine, right? Because they haven't figured out who's going to pay for it, and that's connected, you know. So it's more circular, I think, than linear.
Right. Thanks, Millie. Francisco.
Hi everyone, so I'm Francisco Campuzano. I'm a methods and modeler and business developer at Plus Atlantic Collab in Portugal. And I'm kind in between. I'm not a developer, I'm not measuring, but I'm facilitating some of the adoption of the technologies. And I mostly agree with what had been said before, but I will add something that is like these low cost or accessible technologies, whatever we want to call them, is opening the access to new players, to new markets, new opportunities, and also some new requests. So are not the traditional buyers, and sometimes when we talk to some of the early adopters, they may come with different questions like, okay, you have this, very nice, but can you do this? And then we have to go back and try to look if this exists. So there is also this possible mismatch sometimes because there are, as it was also mentioned, new areas and new and temporal resolution or local areas. So there might be also some need for quick adaptation for some of the demands.
Thanks, Francisco. We'll do Stefan and then Balgis, and then we'll wrap up this question 1.
Yeah, Knut. I'm representing the German O and Ocean Decade Committee and the German Aerospace Center, the Maritime Institute there. Yes, what we are doing is pretty much also working with Global South and supporting them in their development, in particular on coastal ecosystem restoration. And there, of course, there's a strong need on sensors and also of documenting what they're doing, but also need of capacity building. So it goes hand in hand that on the one hand, there's a strong or huge potential for measuring ocean parameters and also ecosystem status, but on the same also setting up infrastructure that people are educated and dealing with the data and by taking that forward. So strongly supporting our sustainable development activities in the ocean decade.
Thanks, Stefan. Balgis.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning. My name is Balqit Othman Al-Ashi. I'm the Regional Coordinator for Climate Change and Green Growth in North Africa. I think it's, yeah, I agree with my colleague that it's demand driven and I mean the development. It has to do with the increasing knowledge and understanding of the needs. So once we understand our needs and we understand the gap, then the demand will increase. And we always say that, of course, the need is the mother of innovation. So the need will come first, and then it will be like an incentive for more production and more deployment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to jump ahead to a little more conversation on the supply side, and that is, what supply side conditions is that financing, subsidies, market guarantees, or confidence in data quality are necessary for widespread adoption of low-cost sensors and platforms? And let's start with Dominique.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Dominique Durand. I'm heading a consulting company based in Norway and working on the ocean observation strategy and governance, basically. So on this question, so I would possibly put the thing a little bit differently. I think one aspect that I feel is has a tremendous importance now for the market growth is the need for deconnecting the production to the maintenance and services. What I mean here is that at present, so most of the company manufacturing technologies are also in charge of the maintenance. And if the production and the manufacturing can be centralized, the maintenance and service to users has to be much more locally based. So, I think that there is something here on the side conditions also for growing the market around that. And certainly also some still a lack of quality standards that could fit both different type of consumers, would it be on the research side or on the industry side also.
Thanks, Dominic. Luis, and then Jake.
Thanks, Hans. Louise Biddle from Voice of the Ocean Foundation in Sweden. We're a philanthropic foundation. Dominic actually phrased it beautifully about I think the impact of maintenance can direct a lot of users' decisions, but particularly the conversations that we've been having with also national monitoring agencies in the Baltic area always comes back to quality control. And what is the quality of the data involved there? They have very long time series of this data, and whereas we need to provide the motivation for them to want to adopt new technologies, whether it's low cost or not, incorporating these new parameters or sensor methods, I think our communication of that will be very vital.
Okay. Thank you. Jake.
Yeah, thanks. Jake Resnick. I'm a Vice President at S2G Investments. We're a venture and growth investor focused on oceans as well as food and agriculture and energy. As part of this question, I see you raised financing and subsidies, I would say, as a component of that. I would say, on the financing side, and I would look forward to folks kind of questioning this, reach out if you're struggling on the financing side. But I'd pull up a comment in the chat from Ann Carpenter. I think we see a lot of companies that may struggle to get financing. Ultimately, a lot of this comes down to who's paying for this product. Is there willingness to pay? And are you able to take your data and put it in a format and speak to a market that will pay for it? I think that there is a lot of active financing out there for companies that can build a minimum viable product and a minimum viable business model. The challenge that we see is, unfortunately, customer willingness to pay is quite low. And a lot of companies really struggle to translate data into something that's actionable for the commercial or private market. So ultimately, that becomes not financeable for a lot of private funders. And I think the government piece and the subsidy piece is a separate conversation. I'll leave that to the rest of the group.
All right. Thanks, Jake. Let's go with Nico and then Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm Nico Augustin from Ocean Quest. I'm the Research and Expeditions Director here. And actually, many valid points were already made, and I really agree, and I'm happy that the repair monopoly basically also was talked about. And some other things were already mentioned, but I had made a note that maybe to overcome that, a cheap sensor becomes very expensive if you need to ship it around the world to get it repaired. Maybe one way would be that industry can come up with standard connections, swappable components that the communities at sea and in the less financial strong countries can just easy repair sensors and devices themselves. I mean, it's all about industry and also earning some money, of course. So you can then buy cheaper spare parts and connectors, but it needs to be still payable in the end. So yeah, but many other things, all of my notes were already said before. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Nico. Jeff.
Yeah, I have a couple of points I'll make quickly. One is just kind of give a thumbs up to the discussion so far about the what I call vertical disintegration, disintegration, that you have this production process, and the extent to which you can allow participants to engage along that production process is going to give a more dynamic industry. Everything from maybe independent third third-party infrastructure providers for field validation, lab tests, expanding the rights to repair instruments, that sort of thing. And so that's one point. The other point, and I may be way off base here, but from my understanding of the context, is that when you have the government as the major client in providing these very large databases designed for multiple users, that you have data standards that are appropriate for that use. But I think to expand the market, maybe some more nuanced data standards would be useful. Some fit for purpose standards where the sensors, the data quality does not have to be as high for certain applications. And rather than just kind of allowing departures from the standards, having standards that address the different levels of quality that are necessary for certain applications would, I think, be useful on the production side, because even unbinding standards, if they're written standards, they are kind of binding, because the people who adhere to those standards are going to be able to market their products better than those who can't say that they're adhering to the standards. And so having maybe a tiered approach, fit for purpose data quality standards would, again, allow for a little more flexibility, a little more dynamic market on the production side.
Thanks, Jeff. We'll wrap this question with Stefan and then Balges.
Yeah, I think data quality, of course, is a matter of interest if the cost for going into deep sea or high seas is very high. So then the cost for the sensor is not relevant if the data quality is not sufficient. And of course, the nearer the shore, then it becomes easier. And data calibration is a major topic. Maybe from space agencies' perspective, of course, we also provide data from space, what is quite an easy sensor in certain parameters, what we can also feed into the global data systems, and where we are also working on closing the data gaps together with Space for Ocean Lines to support, in particular, small island development states in this development. So don't forget the space technology in this discussion.
Thanks, Stefan. And Balges.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I also agree that for the supply side conditions, we need like a more coordinated effort among the different stakeholders, including policymakers, the funders, technology developers, and the end users, because each has a role. We can speak about finance, but it's not only the finance availability, it's also accessibility, the modalities to access different financing instruments, the enabling environment for the supply side, including policy incentives and the engagement of the community, engagement of the private sector as well, and capacity building. So we need this kind of coordinated efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you. Antoine, we'll let you wrap this one up.
Hi there. Yeah, sorry, my microphone was off. I'm Antoine Couzeau. I'm the founder of Oceanovox. I'm a former super yacht captain and ex-business advisor for Maersk. And my company, Oceanovox, is also an emerging ocean data network. We use ships to collect the data. We use vessels. We have our own fleet and some partners. So today it's around 12,000 ships. And I agree with a lot of things you said. Data quality first. Even if you have volume, sometimes we have 100 ships in the same area. So you know when one data is wrong. With all the volume of data. So that's one issue, but it could be sorted out. Also, we managed to calibrate some sensors, remotely, like barometric pressure, and still is, I think it's good. You have the good data and the good enough data, I would say. And the last point I was wanting to say is, of course, financing, because we talk with a lot of people. We are an Ocean Decade project. So first we try to give open access to some of the data, but then we need to make money. So we try to sell some product with some process data, sorry. And what we see is the time to market. We talk with insurance, we talk with, weather routing companies, shipping companies, and there's always something missing to go for the contract, So financing is an issue, especially when you need to grow. The scale, the product, the product we have is like, it's very low cost, but it works. So it's not a problem of cost. We were talking about the order of magnitude. I don't know. I mean, it's not that issue. It's just the way to convince, VC or any equity company to go for that jump, as any deep tech company, I would say, to have this network working and running, and have some sales muscle, to convince the market you have a good product. So it's quite interesting. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to build off of, I think, an overwhelming response to number one, and that is, who will drive demand side growth? Is that going to be governments, individual consumers, researchers, and will that trigger significant, i.e. exponential, short and medium run growth? Millie.
Well, I happen to be an advocate of government stepping in. There are many appropriate roles for governments, and I think one is to de-risk or to help build certain markets. And whether it's through subsidies or some other mechanism, I think they could prime the pump, cause a demand increase, lower the cost, which would spur more demand then from the private sector, academia, and others. And that's sort of my bias on this particular question.
Thanks, Millie. Luis, and then Emma.
I think similarly to you say, Millie, I think risk is the biggest thing here, and that's stopping a lot of the adoption. And I think that this is where some non-governmental actors, NGOs, philanthropic foundations, can step in some places and act as a catalyst. There are some places where we can work with and take on board a risk and demonstrate some of these capabilities, as we've just talked about the quality control. Philanthropic foundations can step in and do some tests and work together simultaneously with the research community alongside governments and industry.
Thank you. Emma?
Thanks, Hans. I was kind of thinking about your kind of mass market, what would our definition almost be of mass market? We've talked around these other things and we didn't have a scale for what we meant, tens of thousands, million or whatever. I mean, it's quite an interesting thing, that in of itself, and perhaps people have an idea of what they mean in our sector for that. But I was thinking, what you kind of need to order to have an exponential growth in markets, and there's often, we have plenty of examples from previously in the IT sector in the last years of a vision timing hitting a need with the product that kind of causes this cascade into a whole new market sector. I agree with Millie that government could also help by focusing in on some areas, and I then drifted off into thinking about where in our sectors would we see these things. Standards can be one thing, a standard to meet on the demand side. This is a sort of the information, and these are the key pressure points. But also I would think that the open ocean is a vast place, and there are a certain number of platforms on there. And a previous speaker was mentioning standardization across shipping. This is one, if we have the right sensors or the right sensor package and the way to do it, that's one platform that does exist. Many ships operating in similar ways. That's a potential mass market in some senses. Fishing vessels, the Fishing Vessel Observing Network, who Cooper spoke earlier, is also another potential mass market for the open ocean. But also in the coast, you're then down to, you've got, with autonomy and things like that, the kind of things that, you know, consumers and others might be interested in. I think the coast is an area where you're going to get many more local councils, many more regional organizations. I actually think the coast, rather than the open ocean, might be the place where mass market might take off in one way or another, first of all. So it was just maybe challenging some of our, you know, maybe guests have thought about this already, but I was trying to think where would be the most likely place for it to take off as well.
All right. No, thanks, Emma. Let's go Cooper and then Stefan.
Thanks, and thanks, Emma, for the F-on shout out. I think what you're saying is very important, is, you know, that there are likely going to be different drivers in different regions for what that mass market could look like. And also kind of geographically, I think the coast is the next, or one of the key next challenges, and that in some places, the key driver may come from private sector, and, you know, that may shift the balance more into kind of a data marketplace, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit more later, is like, what are the challenges with closed data versus open data? But then in many other regions, and I think there will always need to be some of this, is, you know, how do we better sell this vision and the need for ocean observing being, quote unquote, critical national infrastructure, and that nations need to invest in this critical national infrastructure around their coastline. So, yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Cooper.
Yeah. Also from my side, strong support for governmental and philanthropic blended finance. Speaking for Germany, an issue we have here, for example, that we have at least 5 ministries having different responsibilities about the ocean, and we are not quite well synchronized, in particular if we take financing methods from the Direction Fund or for the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, who all include somehow economic development, but they are not linked to science or the business side in our funding scheme. So the topic we are talking here somehow always falls between chairs in responsibilities. What is the topic we try to solve here in Germany with our activities in the ocean? But it could be huge potential if we, for example, with small-scale fisheries and others, we are already supporting also digital tools for fisheries.
Thank you. Let's go Louis, then Balgis, and then end this question with Francisco.
Louis de Magne, with Fugro, a strategic and business development advisor there. And Fugro, for those who aren't familiar, collects ocean data for a living, and we turn that data into insights that our clients can use to better manage their natural or built-up assets. And I just wanted to echo a little bit what was already been said in terms of the government stepping in. I mean, we look at the current markets today. Yes, we work for private sector clients, but ultimately a lot of the ocean data we collect is because they have to comply with local regulations. So I do see the regulatory environment being a big driver for the demand on ocean data and ocean observing. If we think about some of the marine protected areas and marine spatial planning that a lot of countries still have to do, that is something that will drive some of that ocean observing. I do like the idea also of looking at these other markets that Emma was referring to in terms of the fishing industry, where you have hundreds and thousands of individual operators there. The difficulty, of course, is how do you then address them? It's impossible to go one-on-one for each of those and try to use some of that low-cost ocean observing technology that we're developing. But there is definitely something there that we should look into to drive that demand even more into those areas that currently or today do not use ocean technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Louis. Balgis.
Okay, thank you. I think to accelerate this progress, I think we need a combination of factors. We need scaling up in investments. This from MDB and other financial institutions. Of course, we need policy incentive. So governments are key for creating these policies and supportive regulation and laws. We also need to create or develop a business case for private sector engagement as a key player also. Thank you.
Thank you. And Francisco, you can wrap this question up.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, I agree with most of the things that were said before, and I especially with the thing of mentioning that the coast could be one of the main areas that Emma and Cooper was referencing, and I agree with that because this is a game changer. And but when we are talking also about the government, we have also to think that they have the tradition of monitoring. So there is also they can also feel the risk of monitoring to do the compliance of these directives that they were mentioned before. So they feel like, okay, they are going to take a risk for not using what they used to use before. So they need also these intermediate users and not-for-profit associations like ours or others that are here in the room to demonstrate that the data is as reliable, that they're not getting into trouble while doing that. And I think that also because the prices will be lower, there can be other players, especially from the blue economy sectors, that they can also enter and start monitoring themselves.
Mhm. Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move to our final question for this first series, so we keep time for our next two discussions. And I just want to encourage people that if we haven't gotten to something that you really have something to contribute, please put that into the chat at your convenience. But I'm going to end this section and really looking at some of the funding mechanisms, such as blue finance models. Are these sufficient to meaningfully expand production and stimulate market development? Dominique.
Thank you. My answer will be short, but it will be no, clearly. But I think that there is a very big challenge also in new technology development. For observing the ocean, the way it should be observed to provide both the knowledge and the support for industry growth, we are missing a number of parameters, a number of variables, and innovation in that sector is hardly needed, but and should be prioritized, and the priority should come from consensus between the different parties and stakeholders, which is not the case at all. So I think Jeff was mentioning this fragmentation at the beginning. It's really about that. And the second thing is about linking innovation and investment on innovation to investment on the deployment and the implementation of the observing system, which is highly disconnected as I see it at present. So looking at if we want to change gear, basically going for the big investment, changing the way this activity are funded, I think we need to join effort between the different actors, so academia, industry, monitoring entities, and offshore enterprise is certainly a very good mechanisms to do so, and I really hope that we will see a result around that in the future, but also to be able to go to the big investment as with a common agenda and linking innovation and prioritizing some innovations and taking them all the way also on the deployment and implementation side, actually.
Thanks, Tony. Caitlin.
Hi, Caitlin Hardy of Nessie Consulting. I think on the blue financing side, it's also really curious to look at how do we increase the number of investors in the general ocean economy and get them interested. And I think so many of the trends that I'm seeing now are just a fear of if you can't imagine something off of your shore, what does that look like? And so for so many financial mechanisms that are out there but aren't aware of our industry, how do we bring them in? And so I think coastal really lends itself to a strong opportunity of somewhere where people can physically see and physically imagine which to many of us really oversimplifies what we're trying to do, but to get that buy-in of the value that this data can have. And I think that's really the driver of understanding for those who aren't traditionally from this world that want to make a difference and believe that there's value but don't know where to begin. How do we start to give them those little breadcrumbs to bring them along in this journey?
All right. Thanks, Caitlin. Let's go, Balgis, and then we'll wrap this question with Stefan.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I don't think that they are sufficient by their own to create the momentum needed. However, I think there are opportunities because there is a growing interest in the blue economy. And there is also more innovative finance instruments, created because of the multiplicity of this sector. So now we have more. What we need is to create this synergy, the required synergy, so that we'll benefit from all these innovative finance instruments. In addition, the government and international communities are also now shifting, the modalities of or the type of funds. It's not only like loans. There are also subsidies, grants, the technical assistance that can target like ocean monitoring and for the purpose, for example, when we think about climate change, for climate resilience and mitigation purposes. So they meant to say, with the multiplicity of the sectors and different communities, now we can have more venues for funding besides the blue bonds. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan, you can wrap this first section.
In regards to investors, of course, we have the general topic that the ocean or blue economy for a large number of investors are unknown. So they don't have an understanding of the market and the business. And for us, of course, it's a great opportunity also to position ourselves in the global water market as such, because also sensor technology is needed in rivers, in reservoirs, and others. So basically, this is a different market for the same technology, and parameters that are closer to people, like pollution with microplastics and algae blooms or other things in the water that could drive market development and synergies with other industries.
Great, thank you, and thanks everyone. I think an excellent opening discussion. It was great to hear from everybody on the list, or just about everybody. I saw some comments in the chat from folks as well. So at this time, it is 22 after the hour on my clock. Let's take a 5-minute stretch your leg break and come back online at 27 after the hour. Thank you. I'll welcome everyone back to the conversation when you are able to join. All right, let's begin our second section, and that is market evolution for accessible, low-cost ocean technologies. And to kick that off, I'll just do a short introduction and move into our questions. And that is markets for ocean technologies are in a constant flux, influenced by internal pressures, for instance, competition on both supply and demand sides, and from the outside, like market entry and exits, innovation and cost reductions, or from other unexpected or unpredictable events. A market's readiness depends not only on the development of the accessible and low-cost sensors and platforms, but also on a clear understanding of the current and future market conditions. Producers must interpret the ever-changing environmental and societal trends to make informed strategic choices that maintain profitability. This section will focus on the relationship between accessible and low-cost sensors versus traditional ocean technologies, and how these technologies interact and whether they act as complementary or competitive. It will also explore their prevalence in startups versus established companies. This discussion will also consider the challenges faced by businesses whose primary market is traditional sensors or platforms when considering developing low-cost solutions with different performance characteristics. And I know this has been touched on a little bit with the earlier conversations, but hopefully these next questions will be able to dive a little deeper on these conversations. And so I'll start out with the first question, which is, do consumers of accessible low-cost ocean technologies fall into distinct categories? And that is, where are the primary markets for accessible and low-cost ocean technologies? Are these geospatially differentiable? And are there demand side differences that vary by geographic region? Nico.
So I think that's very clear, because so that comes also back to the demand gap, because I think the demand gap is not only in terms of costs, also the demand gap is also geographic, and especially in the global south, it is what I said already before. If you have a cheap sensor, that becomes expensive by maintenance. So of course the low cost or the communities that rather look for low cost and good but not so expensive sensors are often sitting in the global south, and this is what we also support here from Ocean Quest. And we have a lot of dialogues, and we are working with South Africa, South America, in the Southwest Indian Ocean, and this is a high demand. So if you have low cost sensors, we are actually working in the deep sea. That's even another magnitude of difficulty there, because of the high pressures and so. But so I see the global also the global south as a good target area for low cost sensors, whatever it is, and then also not cheap but low cost maintenance options. So that
those have to go together.
Have to go together. Yes.
Yeah. No, good point. No, thank you. Antoine and then Francisco.
Yeah, it's a good point talking about the south, and it's not only having low cost sensors. It's also about empowering the people, giving education and training and everything, stuff like that. Because today we have a couple of projects in the Indian Ocean, so we have equipped boats, and we don't even think about selling the product. We just give the product to collect the data. What we sell is the experience, expertise to grow this education, yeah. So we need to think about a global package. I would say, education, empowering the people, so it's meaningful. It's not only low cost and something you can fix wherever you are in the world. It's more than that, I think. Yeah.
Francisco.
Okay, I think that more also in the line of what we were discussing before a little bit, I think that the transitional areas are in the coast is one of the key places, because even for traditional monitoring, there is not enough monitoring there. Normally, when you see the typical ocean systems or they try to be afar from some estuaries, because I mean, there is a lot of problems with sediment, a lot of biofouling, so they try to be in open ocean. And then the transitional areas, we have a lot of a lack of data in many systems. And I'm talking sometimes in Portugal, but it's not only in Portugal. We're in European project where it happened all the same. And then also from the legislation, these areas are like transitional, so they are not very, very well covered. So we have also small rivers or small water, freshwater sources arriving there that not monitor intertidal areas. So all these areas, I think, is a key place for this type of market.
Thanks, Francisco. Caitlin, then Emma.
I think it's also a balance. I was having a conversation with someone about this yesterday. Is I think low cost is frequently perceived as low fidelity. And really, what does low cost mean? So if low cost, it really just means that we're able to get access to data in a scalable way. So one example is, this company I was speaking with, they're using Apple Watches, which we would consider a low quality sensor, or a low cost sensor, but with high quality data. To do coastal monitoring to a large degree. And so where's the fidelity of what we're getting? And then what is the enabler between hardware and software? And so if low cost means that we are using more software, doing more processing with maybe existing sensors that have been considered to be at a lower level of, low cost technology, what's kind of the balance overall? And so I think it's sort of this interesting almost quad chart that you could make of low cost doesn't mean low quality, and high cost doesn't necessarily mean high quality either, for the balance of where we are.
Yeah, good point. Emma.
Thanks. So there's three areas that I think are useful to consider in evolution. One is that we have things called the essential ocean variables, and these are designed to meet the needs of the users. There's 36 essential ocean variables, but maybe really on a kind of a high impact area, you can kind of come down to a fewer number of variables, especially if you are looking at something like the coastal region. I think we could be clearer around what are the key variables that you absolutely should be taking, right? And that this would be kind of a helpful framework in some other way. I do agree a little bit with Terry's comment in the chat about the users. Some of the things, some of the new emerging networks and other areas where you've seen quite a number of platforms take off, where there has been a benefit to the users straight off, and we've talked around that. We mentioned it in the first question. So there is benefit to the ocean observing system, but there's also a direct benefit from that data to users through that company. And I think that Antoine also was mentioning that in his sort of in the first point that he made, that having that direct benefit. So having more on that benefit side, and on a kind of a system design side, in a use of lower cost sensors, people are saying, that we also need some high quality observations. We do, but maybe we don't need them everywhere. And to have a think about systems where you have, higher cost, higher quality sites mixed with more lower cost observations. And we don't always think like this, thinking about how we deliver a service out of an integrated design, not about of one sensor or another, if that makes sense. And AI will change the covariance, or how new forecasting can come from, citing two variables together that we haven't always done, but that's going to be much more important for services. So I think keeping an eye on how that sort of design is evolving is also important.
Okay. Thanks, Emma. Millie, and then Antoine.
I agree with everything said. So I'm going to add another variable here about the industrialized parts of the geographic world. If we're trying to attract more capital and capital, the people that control capital abhor risk. It seems that having more low cost, high fidelity, thanks Caitlin for sort of emphasizing that, data that would allow them to better allocate capital and maybe mitigate the burden of regulation might help attract more capital into the developed and industrialized world, where they can also leverage existing infrastructure that may not exist in the global south, although I agree with everything said about the global south as well. Thanks.
Well, I think I called on Antoine, but I think that was a double. Sorry about that. Let's go Stefan, then Cooper, and then we'll end with Nico on this question.
Yeah, I also would briefly like to catch up with Caitlin, because using platforms like smartphones or smartwatches or any sensor type that is already out there and available for greater public would be great to use that as a platform and complement maybe with specific sensors to that, and working with the industry who provide those technologies. So that might be an interesting area where also people from sports, we had sailing boats here with Ocean Race, but also people from diving or swimmers or whatever could also utilize being sensor carriers with watches and other software.
Thanks, Stefan.
So building off of what Emma was saying, I think we have a lot to learn from the weather folks. You know, in WMO world, there are, you know, tier 1 instruments all the way down to tier 3 instruments. And it often strikes me that tier 3 instruments and observation networks don't really exist in the ocean space in the same way, and that, you know, we as the low cost community are kind of the tier 3. And so kind of branding it in that way, I think is important and will, you know, make us more successful. But then similarly, there are other concepts from WMO world, like the GBON, the Global Basic Observing Network, which is now starting to make inroads into the ocean as well, with sea surface temperature, I believe. And so, you know, these almost obligatory monitoring requirements. So I think that is something that would be extremely powerful if we are able to lobby the folks at WMO and, you know, have these obligations for countries to monitor their EEZs. Thank you.
Thanks, Cooper. So I'll call on Nico next, and then if I could get some perspective from Claire and the German Ocean Foundation, that would be great. So go ahead, Nico.
Yeah, very briefly only, we had the keyword training on the technologies earlier in this section. And that came to my mind. I remember just some dialogue with some students from Kenya that tried to monitor fishery activities. And so they had low-cost sensors. It was just a GPS on the boat and just a depth and I think it was just a depth and temperature sensor on the net. But there's another component that is the education, because they wanted to use the sensors with the fishers together. And it was very hard to convince the fishers to use these very low-cost sensors, and they were afraid that they are monitored by the government. And so I think education, I don't know if you can monitorize that, but make money with this, but it's also a very important component. You can have the sensors, but then if you don't use them, you will not buy more sensors. So it's all interwoven, of course. But yeah, I've just found it interesting to just mention. Sorry.
Yeah. Thanks. No, thanks, Nico. Yeah. Clara, any thoughts that you can add into this piece?
Yeah, hello, my name is Clara. I'm from the German Ocean Foundation, and I can basically just agree on everything that you guys have been saying. And we strongly focus right now on citizen science projects as well. And we have this big issue on like making the data because I mean, everyone who's using the ocean could like get like data very easily for like, for example, like divers, etc. But then the data submission is a thing that has to be like very easily accessible for everyone, even though you have no scientific background and even though you have no idea about data at all. So this is a thing that we are focusing on right now to minimize the I'm losing the word. So that it gets easy for everyone.
Accessibility.
Yeah,
Sure.
accessible. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, thank you. And Valdis, we'll let you wrap this question.
Okay, thank you. I just want to mention the differences between the developing and developed countries in terms of the demand side differences, because they are driven by economic, infrastructure, and competitive factors. And this will also shape the priorities. So for developing countries, it will be more the cost, the simplicity, while the quality may not be that important. But for developed countries, the interest and the priorities may be different. And this has to be considered because it sometimes not even the outcome, the data generated can be difficult in the developing country set to be used. So there is the issue of capacity. And yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to jump ahead and just get a different perspective here, and that's looking at the role that small players have in this perspective. And so are small players better positioned than traditional companies to advance accessible technologies? And if so, or not, what are the current and future barriers for startups who do want to enter into this market? Luis.
I guess in some ways we could be considered as quite a small player. And I think the flexibility that we have in being able to be very agile, to react to what's going on in the field, to swap sensors out on our platforms with our active observatories that we do here, I think gives a lot of ability to move with the progression that we see in the field. There's some conversations in the chat as well going on about how do we measure low cost? Is it over the lifetime, and how much do we take in recurring deployment and recoveries? And I think from that perspective, one of the things we've seen by swapping some sensors out is it's increased our battery lifetime of our platform, autonomous platform, so we can leave it out for longer. Any vessel usage we cut, I think, has a huge impact. And by us as a small player refining and working on a lot of these interactions, we can feed that into our contacts through the national monitoring organizations and distribute to the community. So I think smaller players have a very significant role to play here.
Yeah, no, good. Thank you. Yeah. Louis and then Antoine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think the difficulty for small players, for startups, is really in scaling up. And I think we all know that many startups fail because they cannot go from the initial prototype and proof of concept and scaling up to be able to meet a growing demand. So I think that's a problem. Part of that problem is also linked to investment, in that it is difficult also for small players and startups to attract investment, because again we go back to this idea that perhaps the needs and the demand isn't there, and therefore potential investors don't really see a clear return on their investment. So it's a bit linked to that, but I just wanted to point to that key issue of being able to scale up as an important one.
Great, thank you. Antoine.
Yeah, I fully agree with Louis, because we are a startup, and Oceanovox is a very small structure. We managed to raise some fund last year. We have the main issue is the market traction. We are the product certified. We have a patent. We deployed our sensors on the first year was like 100 boats. We managed to provide some data to get the first contract. Now we have thousands of boats, and we don't have enough money now to fund the production of our sensors. So it's So we cannot go ahead with the market traction to provide the data, to provide the API, to provide, you know, the contract the value proposition we had at the beginning. So it's a quite tricky situation where you are stuck on the way. So for startups, yeah, and especially now with the world situation, it's even more difficult. You know, people are not very keen to take risk. So, but there are some opportunities when we talk every day with different industry players. I mentioned insurance. There's many, and there's something here. So, and one thing I wanted to also to share is there's a lot of initiative. When we started, we could give, give access to our data to dozens of data platform, and it was difficult to understand who is leading what, you know, and the same for funding, the same for any grant and everything. It's a bit confused when you are a startup and you want to do a bit both open data and premium data, I would say. It's difficult to know what is your best partner. You know, I don't want to throw a stone here, you know, but it's really confusing about who is leading what in the world about the ocean data.
Right. Thank you. Let's go with Stefan, Jake, and then Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Stefan with the Ocean Race and in charge for the science program. So we equipped all of our racing boats with specific science instruments, and we would not be able to do this without the help of small players, mostly SMEs. So we ask larger players to help us with instruments, and typically they are not that flexible than small enterprises. So I would say during the last 10, 15 years where we work in this field, we would not be able to deploy any useful instruments without the help of small players.
Right. Thanks, Stefan. Jake.
Yeah, I actually want to call out a comment in the chat from Scott on some of the programs that exist for startups. The world of ocean accelerators has really exploded. I mean, we need more money here. We need more early stage support of companies. But there are a lot of really good resources available, and this network continues to expand. So I want to call out a number of folks that are here. I would point folks towards the 1,000 Ocean Startups Network. Obviously, Braid Theory is part of this community, and many others. So I do think that in the 5 years that we've been investing in the ocean sector, the ecosystem has expanded really exponentially. Those resources are available to also help founders figure out product market fit. And I think if you're a small company, right, bite off what you can chew. Are you going to become the predominant platform for carbon data for, a large shipping company? Probably not. But if you can get a trial and demonstrate that you have, a use case and build from there and build, at a scale relative to the capital you bring in, I think you're going to see a lot more success in a world where, as has been said many times, right, many investors, even climate-focused investors, don't fully understand the ocean. So showing where the money is and building that MVP business model, scaling really small first, to the extent that you can, I've seen that to be valuable. And then the last kind of framework that I've seen is a really interesting one is I would call out, we're not investors, but Plan Blue is a company based out of Bremen, and they've worked on a partnership with Fugro. So you have a company that is really able to go out and bid for the large contracts, and then you have a startup that can embed as a component of their overall surveillance system. And I think that's a model for success if you're a small company, right? Like, who can handle the capabilities of going out and finding the money, and how can you plug and play in with the scale that you have and grow from there? That might be, Plant Blue could comment on that better than I could, but I see it externally and think that that's a smart approach.
All right. Thanks, Jake. Caitlin, did you still have a comment? Or
Yeah, I was just going to add. So I guess in line with what Jake said, I like the approach that Plan Blue is taking, because one of the things we frequently hear, and this is primarily on the VC side, is that a lot of these companies, they don't believe are at venture scale. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have is when we look at impact versus just making money. There's so many companies that I would still believe are at venture scale, But it might take investors a while to see that. And so how do you sort of go from the, 0 to a billion solution and helping ensure that they get access to capital to grow? And what does that look like, especially with some of these investors who maybe aren't as familiar with oceans?
You want to jump back in, Jake?
Yeah, you saw that. I mean, I would add in, like, I also think there's a reality of this world in which a lot of companies aren't venture scale, right? And let's be real about venture capital dollars. Like, you as a founder, you don't want to touch VC. VC has a timeline. VC dollars are expensive. VCs have, a higher expectation of return to report back as a fiduciary of money. It's attractive companies that are, growing, going through Y Combinator, right? There's a reason software works really well with VC and hardware struggles, especially at early stages. So, I think obviously government dropping out of funding is a big gap. But if you're a founder and you're looking for money, like, be really cautious as you approach VCs, especially VCs who don't understand ocean observing and the challenges and the time that it takes to scale here. You obviously need money to grow and you need that market case, but there are other resources out there. And, I think challenges in the market itself and on the demand side are a real constraint. Insurance is a really good one. We hear 1,000 companies pitching us like, here's value for insurance. There's so much value out there for the insurance industry. But a lot of the insurance industry is kind of stale London, behind old buildings that doesn't want to think about innovation. And if I was, also looking at how do you crack the nut here of building a bigger market, I think that's a question that a lot of early stage ocean sensing companies and a challenge that they have. Like, how do you reach out to what should be a big customer, but in reality isn't and isn't going to pay for your product in the next 2 years?
Thanks, Jake. Go ahead, Nico.
I just want to comment. Maybe I missed it, but I think also the philanthropic players out there, they might be also good sources for funding, especially for startups that have maybe highly innovative and maybe also high risk ideas. So Ocean Quest is here situated in Saudi Arabia, and one of our ideas for the future operations is also that we get our technology at some point here to Saudi, but then we also want to maintain it and develop things here in the kingdom. And there's not many startups here in the area as well. So we are also thinking of if there are ways for us to support young startups here in the region and maybe also elsewhere. There's a good opportunity. There's OceanX, there's Mid-Ocean Institute, there's Inkfish, there are many others that might be also willing to support the development of sensors and ocean technology, even if it's high risk and not very innovative and high risk, because we love this stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Nico. Emma.
Thanks. So I was going to pick up on a little bit of what Jake was saying, and perhaps it's a question back to Jake. It strikes me from what you were saying, Jake, that for VC funding, we might be better off concentrating in some of the downstream use of observations. This has maybe the right kind of characteristics for scale, so that if either your kind of startup has a strong downstream use component, not just sensors, or if you are focusing on the downstream use in some way or other, that you might be more orientated towards VC type funding, given the parameters that you were putting out there.
Let's go Luis and then Antoine.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on from Nico's comment about the role of philanthropy here and some beautiful examples of Schmidt as well and the work they've done. And I think it's not only from the kind of direct funding and financial perspective, but both Schmidt Ocean Institute and ourselves at Voto have been involved in supporting the same sensor development at different stages along its path. So I think there's a lot of technical expertise that also exists in these organizations. They took it at a point where it was being deployed on a CTD, and we've taken the step to integrate it onto an underwater glider. So I think looking at what roles these philanthropies can play in the different stages of a sensor development, I think is another critical contribution.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yes, thank you. And Antoine.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on first, Jake, you are absolutely spot on, about VC. We've been talking with VC and it's a different game, totally. But what I can share some experience we had using joint industrial project. You talk with not VC, you talk with industrial companies, big companies that need the agility of a startup, needs the data, need to go faster than they could do. And we found some interesting insight working on blue carbon credit. Using boats, once again, we develop a sensor to measure SOx, NOx, and CO2 intake, on yachting boats, and talking with the agencies that validate, the credit, the transfer of credit, so it's a different way to looking at funding and testing your product straight away and having some partners and building the story, and potentially go to VC then when you have a clear market fit, so there's a lot of way to work it out. But again, it's back to the basic, understand the business needs and talk to the people who really need the service, the data, obviously for us. But I'm absolutely agree with Jake about that.
Yeah, right. Okay, Dominique, you are the final thoughts, and we're going to move on.
Okay, thanks. So listening to this very interesting conversation, so I have 2 points. The first one is that in a fully competitive market, so startups are key for innovations. But in a priority-driven market, and I come back to what I said a bit earlier, joining forces to create the momentum and making the innovation that are actually needed. So in this priority-driven market, so then larger companies are more the key and supported by a startup and small company to develop the technology, the way that Jake actually was pointing out a bit earlier. So I really strongly believe in that. And if we really want, I think, to grow this market on low-cost accessible sensors, we have to put priorities and design the agenda together. So my second point is that we have been talking now on startups on the technology side, but startups could also be there for the services. And coming back to this need for being close to users, for maintenance, for deployments, for making connections to fishermen, as it was also mentioned before. So there is, I think, a whole sector which is not in place now between the large company and the technology developers for the services, actually, and worldwide. And we should think a little bit on this part of the segment. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dominique. Hey, at this time, I'm going to take a pause and we'll take our second 5-minute break. It is the top of the hour, so have everyone rejoin at 5 after the hour, and we'll end with our final session. So thank you all. welcome everyone back to the conversation. All right, we'll get started on this third section. And again, this is the last participant panel discussion that we'll have before we open it up to the observers who are also on the call and listening in and using the chat. And this final section is examples of market momentum and growth. And so what we're looking at is the coexistence of public and private goods and how this creates opportunities for partnerships and the alignment of societal and commercial benefits. Accessible and low-cost ocean technologies as part of the broader ocean enterprise have both advanced societal benefits and created business opportunities. Private markets incentivize innovation by restricting access to paying customers, while public entities like governments, nonprofits, and universities often provide non-excludable benefits like freely sharing of their data. For example, this dynamic has fueled innovation and commercialization in the weather enterprise, which was brought up earlier today, and this would be representative of large satellite operations and mass media organizations. But from the ocean enterprise perspective, this may also stifle or crowd out innovation and investment in other ocean products and services. So the ocean enterprise is complex. It's got a lot of components that make it so, including international governments, fragmented markets, limited public awareness regarding its significance, along with the diversity of ocean issues globally. Additionally, evaluating local production of sensors near demand centers adds significant layers of complexity, including workforce training, political stability, IP protection, legal frameworks, and quality standards, all leading towards additional and perhaps necessary financial incentives to overcome those risks. And again, this was talked about with a few of the folks earlier today. And so I'm going to lead off this section with our first question. That is, there is a dichotomy of data from public good to private revenue generation. Can public and private data initiatives coexist effectively in advancing accessible and low-cost ocean technologies? And if so, what role should governments play? Balgis and then Emma.
Okay, thank you. Of course, there is this, as you mentioned, dichotomy, and which coexist between private and public sector. Public sector usually the provision of like open access and free data, while the private sector are like revenue profit oriented. So there should be a balance between the need for open access data that can benefit a large different stakeholders, and at the same time the ensuring the profitability for the private sector. I think the government can like create the enabling environment for the private sector so that the first the risk of not profiting, I mean, to risk elimination, supportive policies and incentives, infrastructure that is inducive infrastructure, and setting standards, regulations, and also the need for creating this partnership, public-private partnership that can promote both the advancement of free, accessible, low-cost technology and equitable use and sharing for the climate data. So we have to find this balance. Otherwise, it's difficult because the groups, the stakeholders, they need to access They need free access. At the same time, the private sector can play a role in scaling up, accelerating the deployment of the technology, but at the same time, there are certain conditions that has to be provided for the private sector to secure this as a business. Yeah. So we have to find this business model for the private sector engagement, at the same time ensuring the government is supportive. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. Emma.
Great. So I like very much the idea of finding that engagement model for the private sector, and then perhaps it kind of speaks to something I've been pondering a little bit. And this is the Global Ocean Observing System is having some success in talking with governments now about the fact that the ocean observing should be viewed as critical national infrastructure, and it is important that many nations are investing into their critical infrastructure, but also investing into critical infrastructure for the common good. We can't just observe in the coast, we have to observe in the open ocean in order to deliver services in the coast. And I think at government level, that's where you're going to gain recognition of that, and that's where that sort of dialogue is going to come into play. But government can't pay for everything, right? Not everybody's needs. So the thing I've been pondering is really, and this is taking sort of a leaf out of the WMO, the meteorological community sort of playbook. They have something called a global basic observing network, and we're looking now, pondering what that would be for the ocean as a whole. And the concept is that this is the basic infrastructure, if you like, that you need to deliver a range, not every single service in the world, but a decent range of services. And I kind of, through the conversation that have been evolving, wondering whether what we need is governments to commit to this basic observing infrastructure, and others, we have to find other models to enhance that infrastructure for specific services and needs. And that perhaps picks up on the previous speaker, finding the ways for the private sector to interact with that. And it also speaks to what Millie was saying, that governments can cascade impact, can cascade more investment, but there might need to be some level of a basic system there in the first place to build upon. So that's kind of the areas that I was pondering there, to go to a mixed model, but governments to accept the need to support a basic system.
Great, thanks, Emma. Let's go with Louis and then Stefan.
I just wanted to say I do believe, public good. I think it was said in the chat, and private revenue for new generation. The idea is that you have different objectives, different business objectives, and different risk appetites, and therefore different needs. So it's not that they can coexist; is they have to. So that's the first thing. I think where government can come in is, I think one of the colleagues spoke about it, is in public-private partnerships, of course, because that helps to secure long-term contracts. Then from there you can demonstrate impact, build confidence in the market. That also then attracts further investment. In some of the more fragmented potential users, we were talking about fishing, the fishing industry. There we might want to think about some other models where perhaps that critical infrastructure, the shared infrastructure models, where perhaps there's leasing of involved, or maybe some subscription-based type of access could be used there. So just wanted to point that out. And one last point also is that the private sector and industry collect a huge amount of data that is often just used once and then locked up in some hard drive. And so what Fugger is doing with IOC UNESCO is promoting the idea of corporate data sharing. And I think that's another area where governments can come in and support that by implementing policies where, in exchange for permitting or licensing, private sector make it mandatory for private sector to share the data that they collect for their operations. This is an existing model in the UK and in Norway, I believe, we should be able to spread that out so that we can scale up and fill those gaps with some of that data.
All right. Thanks, Louis. Stefan.
Yeah, I strongly support Emma with her statement that ocean observation is critical infrastructure of governments, and that states need together ensure that the ocean as a global commons is observed in a way that it also contributes to climate modeling, everything related to we have in the ocean health status, in particular when biodiversity and BB&J comes into place these days. So that's something where the government and the global community needs to ensure this. However, if we talk on industries, for example, in shipping or offshore wind and others, they can take their part, in particular in coastal areas, that for their specific needs and for their capabilities, of course, they build additional data networks and then also build different business models behind their data according to their business operations. But then has to be a strong public good in the data and open data sharing among the states on ocean data, because it's heritage of global mankind. Thanks.
Thanks, Stefan. Let's go with Luis and then Nico.
I just wanted to come back to something that's been running through quite a lot of the questions tonight, which is the benefit of having low-cost sensors and access to data, and a knock-on effect being an increase in ocean literacy and an understanding of the importance of observations. And I think this is something that really goes hand in hand with what Emma was saying, that Goose is working towards these ocean observations as a critical infrastructure, is we need to know how to talk to both governments and the private sector for them to understand that they get benefits too. There are massive knock-on effects from more observations, sharing open data, and the critical element as well is for that data to be standardized and easily interoperable and reusable, because otherwise it is no longer easy access. And Louis mentioned the Ocean Decade Corporate Data Group, and I know one of the other things that they've been looking at is whether to incentivize the data sharing to private sector by looking at linking up with ESG ratings, for example, that they can get a sustainability metric as an incentive for sharing their data, because they're supporting, looking after our oceans in the future. So I think there's a few different avenues that we can work on outside of the pure constructing and selling and servicing the sensors. There's this environment around it that I think can have some focus as well.
Great. Thank you. Nico.
Yeah, thank you. I've made a note about data accessibility. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the coexistence of public available data and closed data sets from industry, where you may need to find a licensing module if you need the data. But often we have, or there's maybe the problem that you often don't know about the existence of industry data. So I can, of course, spend a whole expedition on collecting some bathymetric data or seismic data or whatever, and then I find out afterwards, well, there was already a private investor that measured parts here and there. So maybe it's a possibility to come up with some databases, which is then again some industry, of course, data mining, finding the data, where industry is willing to share that data have been collected, but of course they are not accessible directly for free. But finding the data for scientists is already interesting enough. So I know that there is data. I can't see them, but then I can find a way with industry to license the data, which is then an additional source of income, maybe. So yeah, it's public finance data should be publicly available. Philanthropic data, in my opinion, as well. Ocean Quest is sharing this public data availability, of course. But if there's private finance data, it's completely right that this is not accessible, but it would be good to know that the data is existing to avoid doubling of data and just check for licensing options. Tandem X is a nice example. It's from the satellites. They are measuring Earth's surface in very, very high resolution, and science can access the lower resolution, the 30 meters grids, on proposals, you can also get 12 meters, but a very high resolution that is then connected to costs if you need it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nico. I'm going to go to Francisco next, and then I'm going to ask Clara again if we can get a perspective from the German Ocean Foundation as well. So go ahead, Francisco. Oh, we lost Francisco.
No, he's mute.
Sorry. I was mute. Sorry. So two things here. One is the when we've been talking with the administration for using some low-cost sensors, normally we've been testing them along traditional sensors that normally they are the ones that are being used by the government. So this is one of the services that where we can get from the administration, like doing this double testing so they know that these are reliable, similar to the other one that they have. And I think that a powerful tool that the administration has is also the marine spatial planning activities, because at the end they are granting licenses to some institutions to operate in some areas. So this could be another way to say, okay, we granted the license to you, but then you have this responsibility of collecting data in this area. This could be also another tool. Maybe they can have also some incentive for them, or that they don't have to have a big burden. But this could be another possibility for them to ensure this market. Okay.
Thanks, Francisco.
Yeah, the point that I actually wrote down was with a like big mark on it was already the point that Nico said, that we at the German Ocean Foundation are talking a lot about the government as an instrument to combine things that are around the world right now, because we sometimes struggle it as well, that we like try things out or like try to get some data at point XYZ, and that we then find out that other people or other small companies or other small NGOs did it already. So yeah, it was actually the point that Nico said, that like combining stuff or during some regulations that private but also public sectors are like mandatory to like put their information on somewhere.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move forward a little bit and backing up to some comments that have been made throughout this discussion with production of technology and maintenance of technology in developing countries. And we know that there's challenges with not just development of a low-cost sensor, but then the maintenance and the ability to repair and get it back out in the field. What are some opportunities that we have that would help in producing and maintaining ocean technologies in developing countries? What are some thoughts that this group has with strategies that would help that market and help us build out some of these under-observed areas? First, Stefan, thank you.
Nobody's taking that. So of course it's strongly linked to capacity building in those regions. So if you have, for example, in Africa or in other areas, collaborations in place where I would, for example, would highlight this Geomar in Cabo Verde, where they have set up a test environment, a laboratory also for scientists in the ocean space. That's of course very helpful if there's somehow a collaboration between certain competent centers that they help others in other regions to build that up. Might be Cabo Verde, but be an example, or Cape Town, or in Pacific Islands, simply to find some of those partnerships where you have one institution in North who works together with some in the South, and together building capacity in those regions.
Thanks, Stefan. And I'll add on to that question too. What if we start to introduce perspective of generative AI and its ability to disrupt that market and provide additional opportunities? What are some thoughts that people have with where that could go and how that might change our ability to serve these underobserved areas? Antoine.
Well, I will just make a very quick comment because it happened a few days ago. AI companies, I mean, I'm talking about weather models, work with historic data or synthetic data. And now we're able to provide real-time in situ data with our boats and what we do. And we start to see that there's a growing demand on those people having very large and very greedy models on EI, sorry. And so that could be also an option. So I'm talking about business side, not specifically for South and everything, but it works everywhere, and especially sorry, in the South or where in very remote region where there's no data or very little data. So it's another business opportunity, and we start to see that coming.
That's great, thank you. Go with Emma, then Cooper.
Thanks. I was just thinking, I mean, one thing, and I'm going to draw from the weather, right, again, that there are AI models now that are giving, as good a forecasts as the traditional modeling methods, and people are shifting over. But I do believe that they're less kind of labor intensive. You need less expertise to set them up. So they might be more modular. They may well be lower cost for people to set up their services via some level of AI models in the future. But it's not clear at the moment whether weather has had many more observations traditionally, and ocean just simply doesn't have so many observations. So whether the AI model of the ocean is going to follow the same pathway, this isn't clear, I don't think, and so I don't know if people know the answers. But it certainly will demand more observations, and perhaps the availability of a greater number of observations and some sort of highlights for quality observations is the kind of model I think that's going to be useful. So certainly potential to drive, certainly potential to be lower cost services for areas, so they don't have to set up a sort of a very big stack of qualified people in order to produce services. I think that it could operate at several parts of that value chain and produce some, some interesting changes and opportunities there.
Great. Thanks, Emma. Cooper, and then we'll end this question with Dominique.
Thanks. I'm not going to exactly answer the question, but I want to paint kind of an optimistic picture for some of the things that we've experienced in the global South, particularly Africa. I think that these are the places where low-cost ocean tech can really, really be impactful, and that in some ways the kind of traditional tech that we've got in Europe and the US and whatnot can be a little bit of a distraction. And there's some memory there of like, oh, folks, we need the 0.001 degree things, and that's not necessarily true. And so the uptake that we've seen, and it's still very early days with our projects in Tanzania and Ghana and things like that, it's much faster than it is in the developed world. The conversations are, oh, we can't afford any of that other stuff, but we can afford this, and we've got a lot of fishing vessels, so we can instrument them. So to me, that's really, really exciting, and I think mirrors other trends that I know not so much about, but in Africa, where they kind of just like skipped over traditional banking and are now doing mobile banking way better than the US is, and things like that. So I think we should not necessarily be thinking about like, okay, we need to replicate every single step that has happened in the developed world, but that, okay, here's the reality now, and how do we implement the best observing system with the resources that are available? And I think that that's very possible in a way that hasn't been before, particularly because of the low cost tech that we're discussing today.
Thanks, Cooper. Dominique.
Yeah, two things here. So I'm not sure that the case of the global south is very different to the case that we have, or some challenges that we have in the global north, because everyone has to tend to reduce his time at sea, because that's where the big or the expenses are basically focused. So we need more robust technology. We need technology that can be can stay at sea for longer time, reducing the frequency of maintenance, and this will certainly help larger development in the in third country or in Africa. So clearly, but that's a challenge that we have upon us also in other parts of the world. So let's focus also on the things that can benefit everyone. And this aspect of robustness, and when we talk about low-cost sensors, the robustness of the sensors is something that we have not been mentioning really. We have been talking about quality of data, metadata, transmission, but actually, the robustness of the sensor is key also for opening their use for other community, also to citizen science and other part. And it's also, I think, highly relevant in Africa or another part of this global south, actually.
No, good points. All right, Balgis, I'll let you end this question.
Okay, thank you. I think it's also important to provide open access to a specific data set to developing countries. Sometimes it is not the absence of data, but the accessibility. And this can be due to cost or because of certain, conditions for accessing this data. So international collaboration between developed and developing countries to make sure that developing countries can access data sets. This is at the beginning. And then, of course, there is also the issue of capacity to interpret and to use the available data. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to quickly go to one final question in this section, and then we'll do even an abbreviated break before we get into our open questions with our observers. And this last question, how should ocean technology business models adapt to risk, uncertainty, and the changing demand? What steps are needed to strengthen investment decisions under this uncertainty, and are government guarantees or interventions needed to strengthen investment decisions? Cooper.
So this is possibly a little bit controversial, but I don't see the need for necessarily more venture investors and those or impact investors coming into this space. Yes, that would be awesome, but I really think we need more market pull. And so there are market shaping techniques that have been very successfully deployed. The AIDS vaccines in Africa and things like that with buyers club type organizations pooling these demands and these types of things. So I think setting up some of those structures, this would be really, really impactful, and then the investors would fall into place behind that if you sort out the market issues and show that there is real pull.
Thanks, Cooper. Jake.
Yeah, man, I agree with you, Cooper. I think you need the pull before the investors. I would just say that, that the lack of, to the extent that it's a relevant talking point to those on the government side or, watching this from the government side, private dollars aren't coming into the sector unless someone steps up. And in the short term, right, there are market making ways the government can play a role in doing that and orchestrating those conversations, right? That is a toolkit. But at the same time, right, the government stepping away pulls the private market away. And I think that in the United States, you see that, and you see that being a challenge. There's a corollary in this entire conversation with ocean observing and Earth observation. Obviously, the defense sector is a big part of what's keeping the Earth observation world alive, right? Planet IPO'd saying that they were going to be all commercial, right? 70% of their revenue today is all defense. And that's the case with most EO companies that have gone through that tranche over the last couple of years. So, I do think, speaking from the voice of a private investor, right, the government steps away, and that's going to pull away private dollars in innovation in a material way. That will make it harder for private companies to eventually step in and have the scale and the data quality and fidelity necessary to one day potentially, match up to what I think the government hopes to move away from.
Thanks, Jake. We're going to just go with one final comment from Stefan, and then we're going to open up to our audience. So, Stefan, you have final thoughts for this question.
I agree with Cooper that there needs to be market pull. The startups and technology companies need business coming from customers, and investors as such will not solve the problem that they need to have a marketplace.
All right. Excellent. I'm going to make recommendation that we just continue on and move right into our observers portion of asking questions of the audience or of our participants. And so while I don't know the background that our team needs to do to make everyone accessible with the interaction, but I will just reiterate that we want to have questions for the group from the community, and this is a great time to either put that in the chat or to raise it verbally. And if you do have something you want to ask directly, please use the raise hand feature, and then we'll call on you in the similar perspective. And then I'll let our participant panel have a chance to answer. We still have roughly 55 people here in the observer audience, so I may not be able to call on everybody, but hopefully we can. So I'll open this up, and again, opportunity for you to ask questions, areas that you want to pull on that were talked about earlier, or new questions that you have for the group that you feel would be valuable to some actionable recommendations coming out of today's conversation. Okay. Scroll. I am having trouble with who raised their hand, not seeing that. Can someone help me?
Hi,
Oh, there we go. Colin.
Colin has raised his hand.
Yeah, got it. Wasn't showing up right away. Colin, go ahead.
Thanks, Hans. And thanks, everybody. I think this has been a really interesting and productive conversation. I wanted to go back to what we started talking about in the first set of questions, which was participatory science. And I think this often comes up as a solution, but I also want to underscore the fact that while it can drive additional observing, it often comes through voluntary. And as Millie and Jake and others mentioned, those efforts still require financial support. And really, this would drive the ability for that to happen. And so government and philanthropy will play a role in this. And I'm excited to see examples like what Patrick pointed to, the CS Mach 1, where the EU has invested some funds into trying to do this type of work. Those examples are few, however, so learning more about current local conditions is both advantageous to local and federal governments, and investment in local communities to collect this data is both scalable and beneficial. So I'm curious if there's any thoughts on how we build that momentum, or at least the support from governments and philanthropy to invest in this type of model. Thanks.
Luis.
I guess I can take this from a philanthropy perspective a little bit. I think it's about demonstrating again the benefits that there are potentially out there. Because even philanthropic foundations are called philanthropic, but there is a driver behind where that goes. And so I think for lining up and testing a lot of this more citizen science, developing low-cost sensors, I think building these use cases and the communications around it, I think is a really, really critical part to then gain a lot of interest across both government and the philanthropies.
And Francisco.
I was forgotten again to unmute, sorry. Only to sometimes the concept of citizen science, I think that we should also try to rethink about it. Because sometimes when we think about a citizen that is observing is someone that is working in a bank and then goes on the weekend to do a stroll or something. But there are other citizens that they are in connection to the sea every day, like Cooper with the fishermen, or sometimes we are working here in Portugal with the aquaculture producers. So there are people that are really in the field that traditionally they are not collecting data, that they have a clear interest in having the best possible data, and they can really benefit from it. So this can make things more valuable. So I think that we can, sometimes go to this kind of low-hanging fruit for this kind of citizens that they are really interested and probably while testing this low-cost technology, because an opportunity also to them to collect data and have data on their own places. I think that building services on top of that could be an opportunity to have this continuous inputs of data.
Thanks, Francisco. We'll go Cooper and then Antoine, and then we'll move on to our next question from Pierre.
Thanks, Francisco, for bringing that up. I was wondering whether I should raise my hand. Yeah, so the fishing is interesting, and the scales of fishing are extremely diverse. So in some places we're paying a stipend for participation, and that stipend makes it so it's extremely beneficial for them to participate, but is kind of nothing compared to what the costs of normal ocean observation are. In other regions around the world, the fishers are actually paying for the equipment and funding it themselves. And the more we do this, the more demand we have from industry. And they use the data in a lot of different use cases. And we're kind of just beginning to get into data products in terms of what we would think about as oceanography for fishing. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity there to build out those data win-wins. But without those data win-wins, these kind of citizen science type things aren't going to go anywhere, in my opinion.
Thanks, Cooper. Go ahead, Antoine.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I like the point also, and I share the same view with Cooper. And for the sailing community, again, it is millions of boats. And when we started, the main idea was not only to look for volunteers, but to get a meaningful product behind that. And we started to think what we need on the water, because for example, we don't trust weather forecast. Hyper local weather forecast. As a sailor, it's always wrong. So we say, why don't we share our real-time observation of the weather? Every boat's measure the wind, the pressure, and so on. So we started to do that. It's like a win-win situation. So we started to build the community like that. We have a free app so people can share the real-time, weather, and then we started to see the ferries coming, and now we have the charter boat company, because they can see real-time where the boats are, the real-time weather, the guests who don't know how to sail experience, so when the boat is coming back. So we start to build some service. We didn't thought about it at the beginning, and I think it's a good way also to think that of course you get the quality of the data, but you need to think about service, and because people start to pay if there's something in return, and so there's a lot to explore, I think. And of course, for the sailing community, it's a lot of volume, a lot of boats. Fishing, it's the same. But think about the needs of those people. Think about the needs of people, you know, around that business, and that's where you start to see revenue channel or revenue path or avenue. I don't know, you put it this way. And but it's not only citizen science. We're far away from citizen science, because now we talk with ferries, or we talk with charter yacht companies who run business. It's not only citizen science. It's more than that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Pierre, let's go to your question.
Thank you very much. Fantastic discussion again. I think what this dialogue revealed was that we have large diversity in backgrounds, all somehow united under this overarching concept of the ocean enterprise. And there were quite some concrete and actionable remarks made throughout the discussion today. But my question would actually be, if any one of you had basically one concrete suggestion on how we could move ahead as the ocean enterprise community to mature the ocean enterprise, what would that be? I mean, it's your chance to do that in a biased way based on your background, right? But like, if you had one actionable recommendation on how we could move ahead and yeah, get a little bit more in a mature environment, that would be nice if you could try to come up with like a crisp statement here. Thank you.
Dominique?
Thanks for question, Per. One thing I could suggest, and because, as you say, we are very diverse, and the problems and also in the United States or in Europe or the global South are not the same. I think it would be very beneficial for the ocean enterprise to have subsidiaries in different parts of the world with local constellation of people addressing also the same questions, but at a more local or regional scale, basically, and looking at the investment, the market landscape, and so on at a different scale also. So I think it will benefit and make things easier to take real actions.
Thanks, Dominique. Stefan.
Yes, from my perspective, it would be good to have not such a theoretical discussion like we exchange here our ideas. So also thinking about in which area of the world we could together tackle a community, a problem, an issue where ocean data could really add value for solving some of the topics. Could be blue carbon, could be fisheries, ocean health in general. But having one common area in place where we simply figure out how we can promote this in this area. So that would be a bit more going from general discussion in supporting activities somewhere on the ground to have benefit and impact also with the communities, and showcase outcomes and impact, what we can do.
Louis.
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate a point I made a little bit earlier, which is I think if to scale up the ocean enterprise, I would definitely encourage national governments to look at public-private partnerships to really scale up ocean observing and ocean insights. I think that would help. So with both small and large enterprises, help secure long-term contracts, really demonstrate the impact, and then get that water pump going, so to speak, and give more confidence for future investments.
Thanks, Louis. Question from Terry. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, this kind of plays off the answers that Dominique and Stefan gave. And it also, I'd like to reach back to what Cooper mentioned, because I find that a fascinating example of how things have progressed recently in Africa. Basically, what he said, using the monetary system as an example, is that the Africans, as an example of developing community, don't have the money, the resources, and the background to just continue on and implement a standard, if you will, ocean observing system. So they've kind of just leapt into the future and said, these are our needs now. So we're going to use the available money and the available technologies to develop fit for purpose ocean sensing that will meet our needs. And I think that's a critical lesson that we should learn, that one of the things that we as a community here and the general community that we all normally work within is that we are trapped in the current. We're looking at how can we take step-by-step process forward from where we are now to get where we perceive we need to be. But the question of the community is that why? What are you doing? Who cares what you guys are doing and what you think? We need to understand what they want. So going back to what Dominique and Stefan just said, what we're doing with Possibility Ocean is focusing in on the Salish Sea in the British Columbia, Washington state waters. We wish to engage with the community, the industry, the science, the government, the indigenous people in those areas, and say, if you had a fully instrumented Salish Sea, so a completely outfitted digital twin, knowing everything about the Salish Sea, what billion-dollar scientific advancement, industrial opportunity, or societal benefit might you be able to imagine that came from that? So based on the question or the responses from Dominique and Stefan, what could this community do to the Ocean Enterprise Initiative do to try and develop more of a concrete engagement with those stakeholders who actually might benefit from the data, not from our perspective, but from the end user perspective?
Thumbs up.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, but that's a really good example if we can take it there, but also from as I'm also involved in the collaboration between Europe and Africa, I could suggest really looking also into that perspective, because also the European Union and the African Union, they set up a roadmap where they could collaborate closer. And I'm sure that in some of the regions areas, we would find connecting points in this topic. By the way, also back to Canada, it's also a common interest to support those activities in Africa and those regions, but also in other regions of the world. Just an example, because I'm involved there. Thanks.
Next up, Emma, go ahead.
Thanks, Hans. So I guess partly, picking up on Pierre's question, I don't think there's one thing, right? I mean, maybe you're just looking for a selection of things across the panel. I'm not a big believer in silver bullets. And this discussion suggests to me that we've got several key areas of implementation to work on, and understanding our users and connecting with our users more is one of them. But I will say it's not going to be enough, because we've done some work in the co-design project, so working, let's say, on a regional system, looking at the needs from fishers, the needs from government, the needs from weather, the needs from air, sea search and rescue, and they have different needs, and that would all come around a system, and great ideas come out that this is what we need is an ocean intelligence system. So listening to your users really does give you powerful tools to go and speak to others, but it doesn't yet unlock the finances to build out these systems. And so I'm going to go back, and I do think we need to shift a mindset in government around the fact that ocean observing isn't something for science or a nice to have. It really is critical infrastructure for the future, and that this will fundamental message that many people could transmit will help make a shift towards government funding some of it and us finding the models to do public-private partnerships, to do enhancing, to contact the users and have sort of additional services on top of what we're doing. And I think the visibility of the ocean has grown in the public space so much that there is the possibility to do this. But if I do think this is one fundamental mind shift that has to happen.
Thanks, Emma. All right, we are at 55 after the hour. Igor, if you want to do a quick question to the group, we can allow that, but we need to end at the top of the hour. So I'll let you have the floor, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to see many sailors in this panel, and OceanWorks doing great job. So I'm in manufacturing business for 20 years, making oceanographic instruments at RBR company, and now running my citizen science or participatory science project, Sail for Science, and trying to introduce measuring technique for sailors with real CTD profiling. My question and what I get after 2 years sailing in Caribbean and Atlantic Ocean, the biggest problem that we really need to set tag on ocean data. So government need to keep control. How much, we never ask that question, how much the ocean data cost? And as soon as government will make that statement and will introduce requests for data and which area when it need to be collected, free market will work well to fill that area with all entrepreneurs or freelancing data collectors, sailors, fishermen, everyone who can do it for living, and that's would be great opportunity to increase ocean observation and fill gaps in the ocean data, especially in coastal areas where it's a big gap. So
Great.
thank you. Just my last thoughts about price tag. That's, for me, it's important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Igor. All right, I am going to wrap today's discussion. We have a couple of housekeeping items to finish with. First, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for a fantastic conversation, very engaging, and a lot of really good information that will help us as we move forward. I want to thank everyone who participated in the call as observers and the follow-on questions that we had, and certainly our entire planning team who makes all this happen in the background, and can't thank them enough. So I now want to shift this back to Zdenka, who has some key information, next steps, and closing. Zdenka?
Great. Thank you, Han, for once again your fantastic moderation, and to our panelists for their robust and even at times provocative conversation and discussion. That's exactly what we were hoping for. So as Han said, these dialogues don't happen without a fantastic planning team who spends a lot of time talking about the topics and putting the curated use case together in the background paper. So what does happen next? We will prepare a draft report that is non-attributional. It's not a transcript, but rather a summary of main points, and again, focusing on potential actionable pathways forward. There's a narrative for each of these sections for further context. We write this report from both the transcript as well as the chat that you all have been active on. You as participants, you'll receive a draft of this report on about 1 December, and we'll ask you for your comments a week later by 8 December, so that we can then wrap this dialogue up. We will do a final analysis of all 3 of the dialogues and publish that summary report by mid-December. We will then we'll start to publicize the results of this series of dialogues, including some time at upcoming AGU meetings, ocean science meetings, and Oceanology International. So we look forward to your continued support as we all try to mature the ocean enterprise. So with that, we'll conclude today's dialogue, and Hans, back to you for the final goodbye.
All right. Thanks, Zenka. Again, great conversation. Look for these reports to be coming out. Please share them and distribute them widely with your networks, and know that we will have continued dialogues focused on topics of high interest that we want you to engage with in the future. So with that, I wish everyone a good rest of your day or evening or morning, and hope to connect with you soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks
a lot,
you very
Hans.
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks.